What do we look for when we're buying a tyre? Well, the marketplace is awash with different tread, casing and tyre compound options. But what do you actually look for? I think between friends we can agree that price does play its part, but we're hopefully here to inform you today as we do a back-to-back comparison of 4 different tyres. So we've got 4 tyres for a direct back-to-back comparison. Everything from your value-based sort of OE style tyre all the way through to your high-flying, ground-hugging downhill tyre. So let's take a look at what is going to be a comparison within a comparison. Here we have 2 Trail Kings. So the tread pattern is the same, but one comes in at a very, very good value, 25 quid, whereas this one is near 60 quid. So what's the difference? Is it just compound, and does it make that much difference? Well, for a start, this one is tubeless ready. It uses a higher thread count, which is what we call a TPI, and it also gets an extra ply of rubber, so it should provide more support in the corners. It actually comes with Continental's black chili compound, which hits the holy grail of more durability whilst also providing more grip. Next, we have a tyre that is definitely more aggressive while sharing the same casing as the Trail King. This is the Dare Baron. Now, this is something of a bit of confusion for me because I always say it's the Dare Baron, but I'm pretty sure Dare and the mean the same thing. I wonder if in Germany they call it the Dare Baron, but I'm not so sure. Definitely a smidge more aggressive, as well as being a touch heavier, but only a handful of grams. Also tubeless ready and using that black chili compound. So now we have the Dare Kaiser, which is the fully works downhill tyre. So the same one you'll be seeing in teams like the Athertons running. Super aggressive tyre. This has actually got 6 plies of rubber, an incredibly high TPI, much higher than even the Barons, and it is a fair bit heavier, almost 400 grams. So how's that going to translate out on the trail? And is it worth pushing around that extra mass? So here we are on the entry level, the Trail King. And honestly, after many years, majority of my riding life, riding heavier tyres, straight off the bat, they pedal so fast, it's like being on an e-bike, it feels great. Definitely, I've been a bit naughty. I've actually installed them tubeless ready, when technically speaking, they're not a tubeless ready tyre, but they seem to go up okay. Maybe this practice I wouldn't recommend long term, but I think for just 1 or 2 rides, it will be fine. I've actually gone in with a little bit higher PSI than I would normally, just to allow for the thinner tyre casing. And I think that, well, that sounds like an unfair thing. I think it's going to allow each tyre to work as it's intended. The thing I'm kind of, I suppose, nervous about with this tyre is how it copes with big compressions. So even over pretty small jumps like these, it's amazing how much you can feel the tyre deform. Especially on this last one, it seems to just hit a few compressions. Oh! You know, and that's with a higher PSI than perhaps one in the same treaded tyre with a different casing. Quite significantly higher as well. It's amazing that lack of stability that you felt in the air thanks to that takeoff kind of squirreling you a bit and kicking you a bit. This kind of thin style of tyre does feel noticeably less stable, especially through kind of high compression turns. Maybe if I had a tube in there, it would help support that chassis. However, I was rimmed in dinging like nobody's business down there, and I do think if I did have a tube, it would have probably punctured. So it's a difficult one to decide. Super efficient climbing, and perhaps if you're not used to really hitting out those hard hitting descents, then perhaps this is a great tyre for you. It's certainly cost efficient, whilst also being of a pretty decent quality. So now we're on a slightly beefier version of the Trail King, and also, in this instance, the more expensive version. Straight off the bat, you can tell there's a degree more rotational mass, although that's only really when I was kind of spinning it up to speed. But what's remarkable is that I'm a full 10 psi lower on this tyre, and just mucking around in the car park there, it just feels so much more stable. So it'll be really interesting how that compares when we're out on the trail, especially on those takeoffs where the tyre was squirming before. Definitely over the little punchy accelerations in and out of these turns over the roots, you do notice that increase in mass, funnily. Certainly not the end of the world, but it is noticeable. Even through some of these little turns, whilst going uphill but carrying a shade more pace, I can definitely feel more stability, which is crazy because we haven't even begun to descend yet. So much more stable. Oh my God, it's just the feeling of confidence, just so much better. You could just go to flats, no worries. Oh, I just felt so much safer. You know, a word I hit upon earlier on was performance. And I suppose what that word means to you is very different. But to me, it's literally like riding with a set of stabilizers on compared to before. And I think when you sometimes go to tyres with softer compounds, you notice the way they can form on even the very small vibrations is mightily impressive. Now that other tyre did a perfectly reasonable job, especially considering it costs drastically less amount of money. So here on GMBN, we don't really review stuff. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to hopefully provide you with information on the differences. And I do have to say, going from quite a thin sidewall to more of a enduro or trail casing has been really eye-opening. I couldn't really believe it, to be honest with you. And this isn't something that's specific to Continental. Most brands, be it Schwalbe or Maxxis, also offer that same tread pattern in different casings. And it's even things like on the climbs, how much difference it makes having that more support in the carcass of the tyre. So that's both sets of Trail Kings done and dusted. Now it is time for the Baron. So this is a lot more aggressive in terms of the tread than the Trail King, but uses the same casing, and it's also about similar money. Coming from the car park then, you can already hear the difference. The knobs on the Baron are slightly taller, and so they kind of as you put down the power. Now that noise, in my mind, probably doesn't point towards efficiency, as each of those knobs is going to have to deflect and warp, and that in itself will be a loss of power. The noise, that noise of inefficiency and drag we heard on the road, is no longer here, now on something looser. And a heavy, more aggressive tyre can actually be quite good for climbing. If you imagine it trying to scramble its way up the small steps and nooks and crannies of roots, but it's heavier. And like I said, all those knobs are gonna deflect and be energy sapping in the long run. You often see people at trail centres on really hard packed terrain running these sorts of cut spike tyres. Now it's a great tyre, don't get me wrong. I do wonder perhaps if you wouldn't be slightly better at going for something with a shorter stack height in terms of the knobs. Yet again, another massively different experience by changing tyres, although this one isn't such a surprise, admittedly. You know, we all do experiment with different tread patterns, and these ones with the longer knobs that are kind of almost like a cut spike definitely do fare better than the looser stuff, but you do feel them kind of rolling, kind of squirming on that hard pack man-made stuff, especially your berms where you're hitting really high cornering load. So I would say for most riders, if you're on your trail centre stuff, maybe stick to something like your Trail King or your High Roll or your Hands Damp, something that isn't quite so long in terms of stack, and it will actually feel so much more stable and consistent in those high load turns. But personally myself, I like to ride more natural trails, a lot of loose terrain, so I will probably be continuing with this sort of tyre. Maybe you could mix and match if you wanted the best of both worlds, that lower stack one at the rear where most of your weight is, so when you are slapping bass, it kind of feels a bit more stable and a bit more predictable. Time for the downhill specific casing, which is quite substantially heavier. I mean, straight off the bat, you can see why you normally want them on a downhill bike, and the emphasis being put on gravity orientated riding, because they are noticeably heavier. I'd say it's similarly reminiscent of pedalling upstream against a strong current of terra miscelata. So you're certainly putting the watts out just to get it going. On the flat, you don't notice it, but even then, it's going up a slight incline, bit of acceleration, and it is drastically different. Whoa. 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 Oh. Oh, I can't talk anymore. And yeah, as soon as we get to some punchy climbing, you my word! Neil used to say he used to pedal around in these in his enduro days. For me, I never fussed about weight whatsoever when specking up a bike. But normally, the downhill tyres are maybe a step too far. Having said that, the way they can handle those compressions and those lumps and bumps and keep you feeling super stable is really quite impressive. It's amazing the level of stability increases as you've gone to a thicker tyre, especially on relatively small jumps that overshooting them is always in the back of your mind. But actually going deeper with thicker tyres, it felt so stable and actually just a lot safer. So for bike parks and stuff, I'd say it's really worth thinking about. tyres do have an uncanny ability to damp out the trail and really reduce that noisy, harsh feeling that you get. That being said, they take a bit of manhandling for your trail centres, your pedally climbs. So that's why they tend to be the port of call for really aggressive riding on gravity-orientated trails. However, some people have been known to put a downhill tyre on the back to provide that stability we're talking about, whilst also mixing it up with a slightly thinner casing tyre for the front. So I'll leave that to you to decide whether it's worth it for yourself. But I think a week in the Alps is something I would be thinking about. So in conclusion, are expensive tyres worth it? And how does a 25 quid tyre stack up against something that costs over twice as much? Well, I think remarkably good. I mean, obviously it depends upon your intents and purposes, but 25 quid for a tyre that's going to enable you to ride trails and probably, you know, let you have a good time on them, well, that seems like a good idea to me. However, if performance is on your mind, undoubtedly the difference is huge. I would say it is going to open up so much terrain to you, and your bike, no matter if you have the best suspension with the best geometry, it's still relying on the information being passed onto it by the tyres. So tyres really are an important factor for me. In terms of the various different tread styles, I think definitely if you are a trail centre weapon, you absolutely love hunting those Strava KOMs, both up and down, then something like a Trail King is a great tyre. It doesn't roll so much, but is very, very stable and also very pedal efficient. The Baron is still probably going to be my go-to for all-round riding in the southwest, but if I was to do an uplift day or similar, I would be reaching for downhill tyres. The way they pad out the terrain is second to none. So hopefully we've helped shed some light and enable you to make a more informed choice in the future. Now, if you want to see people really work for their money and not just changing tyres, check out how the boys got on with none other than Nino Schurter, as they were absolutely put through their paces in the gym, and checking out just how strong he is. For that one, click down there. And if you want to carry on with the theme of tyres, I did a really in-depth how-to for setting up tubeless over on GMBN Tech. So click down there. As always, thanks for watching, and please don't forget to like and subscribe to keep this all going. Thank you very much.